Good afternoon, and happy Monday. Gonna wait here, allow a few people to pop on. I want to talk a little bit about last week. In the wake of the events, I talked about restoring personal power, and it led me into several conversations over the weekend. It's particularly about the insidious trauma that we face on a daily basis. And so for me, as the way I look at things is always about how do we eliminate or protect our mind space from this type of thing, because we are in a world that is constantly stimulating us in one way or another, especially if we're on social media, if you're watching television. There's always some external stimulation, and it's important to begin to understand that we need to protect our mind space from these insidious traumas, things that we may not consider to be huge traumas, but when you look at the type of underlying messaging that it sends, it impacts the unconscious mind. And as you all know, as an NLP trainer, as a hypnotherapist, as a master practitioner of NLP, I am all about all things brain behavior and the unconscious mind, because at the end of the day, the unconscious mind, it determines our actions, it determines our behaviors, and it really determines how we perceive the world and the kind of results that we produce in the world. So, I just want to kind of talk a little bit about protecting your mind space and the ways that we do that. And I would love, hey, Wellness Woman, I'm happy to have this conversation with someone who wants to come on and have a little dialogue about protecting the mind space. But the first thing and the most important thing in protecting the mind space is being able to recognize the things that are not healthy to put inside of our minds, right? So, there is being mindful of, people always say being mindful of what you take in, but sometimes we get, in our society, we become so desensitized to violence. We become so desensitized to these things that, in effect, you may not even know when you are sending these unhealthy, unconscious messages to your mind. And so it's important to think about, to take a step back and look at and recognize, well, what are these types of things that can send unconscious signals, trauma signals to the mind. And so, one of the things, and I'm going to talk about it from the space of the things that we see on TV, but also the conversations that we have. And then there's also, of course, the people that we allow and keep in our lives. So the first thing is the most obvious thing, and that's the information that we're taking in. That's the information that we're taking in, and yeah, we have to, I love what you say, cross out toxicity, taking ownership of our reactions and our triggers and ourselves, which is the only thing that we control. And before we can even do that, we have to be able to recognize when we feel some kind of way. A lot of people call it triggers, but I call it feeling some kind of way, because sometimes there are people out there who are so desensitized to their emotions that they don't even know when they're triggered. They don't know that term. They don't know what that means. And so I think about it like feeling some kind of way. And I know that because I was one of those people at some point. At one point, I was so disconnected from my emotions that I could only tell something didn't feel good, but I couldn't identify it as a trigger or such. I just would feel some kind of way, which is why I use that word, that phrase. Anyway, so that's one of the key things, is to be able to connect with our bodies and to when something feels physiologically icky in our bodies. Let's just back it up a little bit. We take in information through our senses. Okay, we take in information through our senses: visual, auditory, olfactory, gustatory, and kinesthetic feeling. All right. So a lot of times when we get disconnected from our emotions, it's that we're also not present to our physical body and the sensation in our physical body. We may be taking in through one sensory mechanism, but maybe disconnecting all others. And we have to be able and aware to be connected into the kinesthetic, because the kinesthetic, which is the feeling, that is actually going to tell us a lot about how we're processing things. So how do you get back into your body? How do you get back in touch with that kinesthetic and that feeling, like these gut feelings inside of your body? Well, one way, of course, is meditation, mindfulness meditation, right? Sometimes it's sensory deprivation. That is, that's a long phrase for saying quiet, silence. And I meet so many people who have such a hard time with being in quiet and silence because it's so uncomfortable. But it's the discomfort that is the signal. It's the discomfort that is the signal that there's something that needs to be addressed. Okay. So now what happens is, we're in front of social media. We're in front of the TV, listening to CNN or listening to talk radio. So visual and hearing, right? We're taking in all of this sensory information, and processing it at such a rapid rate that unconsciously there are things that might be going into our mind that we don't realize is unhealthy. So we first got to recognize what are the things that are unhealthy to be bringing into our body. I think that it is wise to limit the amount of violence that you take in, especially the violence that's happening, on the streets in our country. I think it is important from a standpoint of knowing what's going on in our country to maybe peek at the news. But I'm a person who doesn't watch all of the news. I watch the headlines. And there's a reason for that. I want to know what's going on in the world, but I don't want to watch it. I don't want to see. When George Floyd was murdered, I absolutely could not watch that video, because that in and of itself is a traumatic experience. And even though I wasn't the one experiencing it, to watch it and to know that that is happening to a human being on this planet, in this country, who, for none other than his skin color, is a painful and traumatic experience. And it, to use the word, triggers an unconscious conversation of that's passed down through generations, like a collective conversation. It awakens that in me, like the worth conversation, but not like personal worth, but like global worth as a person, as a people, right? And the lack of humanity. And it's painful. So let's fast forward it, because there's been many murders since then, and there's also been a lot of unrest and violence since then in our nation. And so one of the things I think it's important, like let's just say what happened last Wednesday. There were people who were glued to the news, glued to the television, glued watching it, commentating on it. And I think that especially as Black people, and probably beyond that as well, non-Black, non-people of color as well, right? But as Black people, it's a traumatic thing to see. The reason being that we already know that the way that attack on the Capitol was handled would have looked entirely different, and has looked entirely different, if it were Black and brown people. All right, so that's just the facts of the matter. We know that. So to then immerse ourselves in watching this injustice happen, and then to have that loop of thought reinforces this global consciousness conversation, this traumatic conversation that we've been dealing with over and over and over again. So while I feel like, and this is, this is a personal comment, a personal opinion about it, but I think it's very important as a professional that I speak at this, is that while it's important to understand the dynamics and to know what's going on, to sit and allow these these things to watch, to be glued to a television, to be glued to commentary about it, is in effect unconsciously feeding your mind with messages that may not be healthy for your personal power, right? We all have we have a collective power, we have a personal power, but if we don't maintain our personal power, we cannot come together to be a collective power. And that's just the fact of the matter. So you want to be mindful of the things that you're putting into your, you want to be mindful of the things that you're putting into your brain. And the second thing is you want to be mindful of the conversations that you're having, because what happens is when you're having those conversations, you can hear my son in the background here. When you're having those conversations over and over again, when you're in those political conversational loops, it taps into an emotional loop that can be unhealthy, an emotional traumatic loop that can be unhealthy. So I think that some of these debates may be healthy, but there should be a limit to it. There should be an absolute limit to it. I personally, unless I'm in a safe space where I know that expressing my opinion about it can be healthy, can be a healthy debate or can be a healthy interaction, I don't engage. The fact of the matter is that, for myself, backing up. So for myself, I don't engage in conversations, in these sort of political debate. Thank you for that. These sort of political debate conversations that are not healthy, right? And so what I personally do is I wait until I'm in a safe space where that engagement can be, productive. And the fact of the matter is you can't change a brick wall's mind, right? You can't argue with a brick wall. So at the end of the day, you have to know who you're going to step in these conversations with so as not to create a negative conversational loop, a negative conversational experience around this. Again, protecting the mind space, protecting the personal space. And then the third thing is you got to know when to unplug and completely engage in something different. Completely engage in something that's non-politics related, non-trauma related. You need to feed the soul. So what are those practices that you put in place to feed the soul? Whether it's the time with your family and the cuddling with your kids, whatever that is, there needs to be dedicated time to nourish the soul, to put back what is being taken away emotionally and mentally by all of the events that are going on. So you need to limit exposure via information channels, right? Visual and auditory, right? You want to get connected kinesthetically with your body. When it doesn't feel good kinesthetically, you want to take a step back, especially if this is information consumption. So you want to limit consumption. You want to get connected to your body so you can identify when the feeling is time for you to disconnect. You want to be mindful of who you're engaging in these conversations with and limit the negative conversational loop, right? Remember, you cannot argue with the brick wall, so don't even try convincing people, right? So you want to limit the negative conversational loop. The third thing is to pour back into yourself. Have a daily structure in place, where you pour back in yourself, where you connect in non-political, non-worldly things, and where you're just allowing yourself to be quiet, silent, connecting, and grounding. Okay? Whether it's a spiritual practice, whether it's time with family, whether it's, getting a good laugh in, it's a funny show or funny movie, whatever it is, just make sure that you pour back into yourself and create a positive kinesthetic experience, a positive conversational loop with someone, so that you're actually nourishing yourself and not just preventing the negative. All right. So that is what I want to talk about today. Comment and let me know how you're protecting your mind space. And of course, any of you who are on the Clubhouse, we have these conversations. We're having these conversations week to week. I'm doing meditations week to week. I'm doing hypnosis sessions, personal hypnosis sessions. If you feel like that you want to have a personal hypnosis session, reach out to me, message me. And of course, if you feel like you want to learn NLP, then you could just click the link in the bio and take a look at all of the programs that we have to offer. So I hope that you all have a great rest of your week. I will be back on Thursday. And, oh, there he is. Hi. We hope that you have a wonderful week. All right.
I lost the tooth.
He sure did. Take care.
Bye. Take care. Have a good Christmas.
Okay. Bye.
And Thanksgiving.